The chief drove a black Cadillac with Godfather white walls from the early 40s. Jack, his right-hand man, was riding shotgun as they pulled up to the white farmhouse north of Chicago where his son was being held captive. Nearby, there was a barn. Other than that, they could see nothing but cornfields for miles. They parked the dusty black Cadillac on the shoulder of the street in front of the house and grabbed their gun belts before getting out. The chief was half Sioux and half Irish. He stood around 6 feet tall with a large chest and broad shoulders. He wore a black Stetson cowboy hat from the 1800s, and under it, his straight black hair hung down to his shoulders. Checking out the house, he strapped on the black gun belt holding his ivory-handled Colt 45 Peacemaker, tied the holster strap around his thigh, and slid on his black leather blazer. He wore a gold ID bracelet on his left wrist that spelled out Chief in quarter-carat diamonds. There was a chance it would get in the way when he found his revolver, so he took it off and hid it under the front seat of his car. The gold ring he wore on his left hand was shaped like a Sioux chief's head with diamonds in the band of the headdress. He thought about leaving it in the car, but decided it wouldn't get in the way. At 6'2", Jack was much thinner than the chief. He wore a fingerless glove on his left hand, dark jeans, a tan leather vest over his flannel shirt, and a reasonably new white cowboy hat. His gun belt carried a single-action .38 revolver. The chief grabbed a briefcase full of cash from the back seat, and the two of them walked down the gravel driveway. When they got to the front door, Campanero opened it, saying, "Hey, Chief, Jocko, come on in." They entered the house, ready for anything. Campanero closed the door. Olivetti was wearing a dark gray pinstripe suit. His short black hair and mustache were well groomed. He pulled a cigarette out of his mouth and said,
"Hey, Chief, you know I don't believe in dragging women and children into our business. I did my best to watch after your boy."
"Where is he? Get him out here now," the chief demanded. Campanero jumped in.
"Hold on, take it easy. First we got to count the money. You know that."
The chief threw the briefcase on the couch. Campanero sat down and opened it on the coffee table. After a few minutes, he said, $100 grand. Not bad for a damn engine." He yelled, "Fast Eddie, bring out the boy." Fast Eddie had been shot by the chief a few years back. He pushed Joe down the hall with jabs from his submachine gun. When the chief saw his son's mouth gagged with a sock and large bruises on his face, he became even more infuriated. Joe met his father's gaze as he walked down the hallway. The chief was one of the few brown-skinned people with blue eyes. They were deep like the ocean, full of intensity and mystique. Joe wanted to cry out to warn his father despite the steel at his back, but he was only able to whisper, "It's a trap." Immediately, the gun barrel lifted from his back, and Joe heard an extremely loud rat-a-tat-tat near his right ear. He fell to the ground, seeing his father stagger backwards with blood pouring from his chest. At the same time, he saw his uncle diving sideways through the air, fanning his revolver. He crawled toward his father on his knees and chest with tears pouring from his eyes. He heard Fast Eddie fall to the floor behind him, but only cared about whether his father would be okay. Campanero left the money on the table and dove through a window as Jack rose to his knees, shooting at him. Jack jumped to his feet with his revolver pointed at Olivetti. He took a few steps toward Olivetti, then looked to Joe, who was leaning over his father, crying hysterically. Off to the side, he saw Fast Eddie laid out in the hall with 2 bullet holes in his forehead.
"Go ahead, Jocko,"
Olivetti whispered.
"End it for me. I want out. Dragging a little kid into this shit ain't right. End it for me, Jocko. Please pull the trigger."
Jack started to pull the trigger, but at the last minute he jerked the gun sideways to blow a hole in the wall instead of the right side of Olivetti's head. With tears pouring from his eyes, he yelled, "Get the hell out of here! Now!" Campanero had the car running outside and was waiting for Olivetti.
"Did you get the money?"
he asked when Olivetti climbed in. Olivetti managed to light a cigarette despite his shaky hands.
I thought you grabbed it when you went flying out the window. All well. At least we took care of the chief. Didn't even have to get our hands dirty.
Campanero smiled as he put the car into gear.
We'd better get out of here while we still can.
Back in the house, Jack knelt down next to Joe, who was crying on his father's chest, his hands still tied behind his back and his father's blood smeared across his face. Jack started to untie his hands.
Jesus Christ, son, I don't know what to say. I can't believe they pulled this shit.
When Joe's hand came untied, he ripped the gag out of his mouth and screamed, "They killed Dad! He's dead! They killed him!" Hysterical with grief, Joe pulled the chief's Colt from the holster, ran out the front door, and fired the gun, blowing out the back window of Campanero and Olivetti's dark sedan.
Jesus Christ, Tony, get the hell out of here!
Olivetti yelled from inside the car. The gun had kicked hard enough to fall from Joe's young hand. He quickly dropped to his knees and picked it up. Holding it tighter, he held the trigger down and fanned the hammer, blowing out the rest of the sedan's windows. Seeing his father get killed had broken his heart. Seeing Campanero and Olivetti fishtail out the gravel driveway and race away scattered the pieces of his broken heart. Joe collapsed, crying in the grass. Jack walked over and sat next to him, quietly rubbing his back, wishing there was something he could do or say to comfort the kid, but knowing there wasn't.